Don't we all wish for the day when the house of our dreams is finally in our possession? We know we do. However, as life would have it, what we want hardly ever turns out good for us in the end, and unfortunately, this story proves just that. Before we continue, please take some time to subscribe to Dailydose, like, and share this video with your friends. Unanswered Question Set is about Christopher, a new homeowner who got much and more from his remote and rural property. As we reveal the details of this story, you'll soon realize that nothing is as it looks, and everyone should get their home inspected before they buy it, and we mean everyone. Intrigued, he began investigating, but he did not know that going down the terrifying tunnel meant there was no going back. He kept going even when he was advised by a police officer and a realtor not to go any deeper. When Christopher was done with the investigation and all the proof was in front of him, he knew his only choice was to go away and never come back. What exactly did he find when he explored his new home? Christopher Wanless purchased a new property not that long ago. Resting on 16.5-hectare woodland fields, he was thrilled to own a space that was completely his own. Unbeknownst to him, he was about to stumble on a portal of sorts in the land he now owned, wandering the woodland. Nonetheless, it seems like this was what fate had in store for him. Once, he went on a tour of his new property and its surrounding area. The seasons were not gentle, and they have stripped away the outer layers of the trees in the area. However, this only made the surroundings look even more beautiful. Christopher enjoyed everything the area had to offer, from the bird songs to the silence of the forest. It was not long before his feet began to wander on its own as his body and mind both went into autopilot mode. Suddenly, something caught his attention. Christopher was still in some sort of haze when he approached the direction of the object that caught his interest. It was rather small and dark, almost like it was in hiding. Could it have been just another tree, one that was smaller, darker, and older than the rest? Although this was what he initially thought, he got the sense that he was wrong when he got closer. He felt a thrill of excitement and some terror as he continued to inspect it. Christopher then stumbled and fell down into a 3-foot ditch. Covered by mud and leaves, he was dumbfounded by the fall. He shook it off and looked at what laid ahead in front of him. What he saw perplexed him. Did he really just discover a mine located on his property? Judging by its appearance, it looked abandoned and old. He felt compelled to investigate the secrets held by this intriguing structure. The exterior of the mine had been covered with moss-like material, and it was hard to look inside. He was thrilled to embark on a new adventure, so he went home to get a flashlight that would let him see what was hiding in there. Christopher narrated that moment by saying, "When we bought the house, nobody ever told us about the fact that the estate had a lot of mines on it. We just sort of stumbled upon the gold mine one day, and that was it. When I first saw it, I was so excited that I almost fell over myself. The only thing that I could think about was Indiana Jones and Underground Railroads. Turns out this was something far more exciting than any Indiana Jones movie." At that time, he did not have any idea this would be the worst decision he would ever make. Nonetheless, he made it back to the entrance, now armed with a flashlight. He was holding his breath, and he was welcomed by something sparkly on the walls as he stepped inside. What was it? The walls were damp and looked like they would fall down at any given moment. His footsteps echoed, and he could not help but think about all the soil pressing down on the structure. He wanted to stay there for some time, and this was evident since he took a flashlight and 3 backup batteries. When he neared the walls, he could not help but brush his hand around the sparkling material of the stones. He remembered thinking, what if this was gold? However, he soon forgot about all of that when he noticed something that could change the course of this adventure right away. Regardless of the temperature outside, the mine was cold and rather damp. He was quick to notice that the footprints he made left 4-inch indentations on the soil. It looked like there was a source of water since there were fresh pools of water inside. He worried since he knew stagnant puddles in places like this could carry dangerous gases. However, as he looked ahead of him with the flashlight directed straight outward, he still could not see the end of the tunnel. He could tell that there was someone or something else in there. He then began hearing noises echoing the tunnel. Curious, he started to follow the source of the noise, and he clearly did not know that this was the wrong move to take. As he kept walking down the tunnel, there was no movement of air, no warmth, and no light. He held on tight to his flashlight, almost as if he was holding a blade for battle. The noise got louder this time around. He could hear old metal parts and machinery somewhere along the path. He also began hearing voices. He could not tell what they were saying, but Christopher was brave enough to shout, "Who's there?" The only response he received was his echo. Courage filled him, and he was determined to see who was hiding in there. Now surrounded by dirt and water, his boots went in deeper with every step he took. He saw a yellow ventilation system in place, but it looked like it was falling apart. There were also chains hanging low near each other, but they were all moldy and rusted. Christopher suddenly felt strange and felt like there was weird energy down there. There was something pulling him back, and he felt like he should not have been there. Nonetheless, he kept following the path of the water to trace where it came from. Perhaps that was where he will find the sources of the voice. Was someone living down there? The ambient temperature also seemed to suddenly drop all around me at this point, and I felt an even stronger negative presence ahead in the tunnel, he narrated. He was nearly 150 feet into the tunnel when he turned around and found some light near the entrance. He could not believe what he saw as soon as he looked back. He could only stand there for 2 seconds when his body finally reacted. He jumped, held on to the walls, and felt his claustrophobia grow stronger. One of the chains started to swing. No, it was not a light movement, as it was moving with strength. He knew someone was there, watching him. His heart was pounding when he ran all the way back to the entrance. He knew he had to escape and contact someone about what he found. The question now was who? Sweaty and terrified, he made his way home. Christopher immediately reached for his phone and got in touch with the realtor. He then began describing what he saw on the walls, the sparkly stuff that gave light to the small but deep tunnel. The real estate agent told him they were sending someone to take a look at it. When we went to ask about the place, we were finally told that the estate had actually been home to quite a lot of mining sites. A lot of mining was done in these hills at the turn of the century, and there are a lot of little mines that are scattered across the hills, Christopher recalled. Although Christopher initially felt better after the call, his body tensed up right away again. "This cannot be happening," he exclaimed. Christopher had been standing in his kitchen when the call ended. Much to his surprise, the lights began to flicker. He tried to control the panic blooming in his chest and started breathing rapidly. The flickering lights went on for a while until everything suddenly went dark. Dropping temperatures and flickering lights. He made his way to the location of the switch in the room and turned it on and off. Nothing happened. Instead, he began to feel a chill that had not been there moments before. A breeze suddenly hit his face. He still had his wits about him, so he quickly retrieved the flashlight from his pocket, flicked it on, and directed it to his thermostat. Christopher saw that the temperature inside fell quite a bit and that his breath made a cloud in front of him. How strange, he thought. He wanted to get the power back on, so he headed for the circuit breaker. Maybe a fuse had just blown. Technical problems as he held up the light to the breaker. It did not look like anything was wrong. Everything was in check and the main fuse looked perfectly fine. As he kept investigating the box, he tried switching different things on and off. Luckily, this worked and he was relieved that nothing more sinister was at play. Faulty wiring, he told himself, even though he still felt nervous. He headed back upstairs to fetch himself a glass of water and calm himself down. The moment he got there, however, he heard the doorbell ring. What was it now? Mr. Rudall quickly introduced himself and explained that the real estate agent sent him because of what Christopher just discovered. He wanted to see what he just found and was intrigued about the substance that he described over the phone. Christopher showed Rudall to the entrance of the mine and told him to be careful as he made his way down to avoid hurting himself. As they walked quietly through the woods, the sky looked gray, just as it would right before a storm. They both took out their flashlights when they reached the mine. The sparkling substance looked even more evident this time, and the glare hit them in the face. Rudall approached the walls for a closer look, and he could no longer hold in his excitement. When he turned to Christopher, it felt like the mine was trying to tell them something. Rudall then told Christopher something rather troubling. Rudall started telling Christopher how the mine was a gold mine that had been made a long time ago. As he stared at the walls, it was evident that the gold remained untouched. There was enough evidence that the miners did not finish the job and abandoned the mine instead. Why was that? Rudel then explained that there had been plenty of rumors about mining during the turn of the century, though he did not know about any particular gold mines before this one. So why did the miners abandon the mine and leave all that gold in there? Nothing positive came to mind, but Christopher wanted to know the truth. He willed up all his courage to further investigate the mine, and there were two things on his mind. One, he could find gold instead. Two, it could also be haunted. He prepared for the excursion and headed inside with spare batteries and a flashlight in hand. As he made his way down the path, darkness soon enveloped him. Previously, he was only able to make it 150 feet into the tunnel. He knew that he needed to keep going no matter what happened. That was the only way he could get to the bottom of this. It was 600 feet into the tunnel that he discovered the source of the water. It was, get this, a door. He felt the shiver go through his body, and the water falling onto his face blurred his vision. He sucked in a breath and brought his fist up to knock, even though he knew he would not get an answer. He opened the door and got the shock of his life. It seemed like he had entered a whole different world. Regardless of the weather outside, the room was freezing. He touched the walls, and they felt colder and rougher than those outside. He felt his claustrophobia telling him to go outside right that instant, but then the light from his flashlight hit something else. There were plenty of ruined objects huddled together, but it didn't make any sense to him. After all, why would anyone leave their stuff there? He felt that the air had gotten thicker and a huge pressure built up in his chest. There was something weird going on here, and he did not know what it was. When he inspected the hunk, Christopher saw a bed spring. It was rusty and torn, and it was all the answer he needed. Someone lived there, and it does not look like they were in a hurry to stay anywhere else. Christopher could not get the thought out of his head when another thing caught his interest. He saw a brick hideaway. This did not comfort him because who needed a hideaway in a door in a mine? The answer is someone trying to hide something important. Curious, he approached the hole, but he did not find anything there. Just as he was turning around to retreat, he found something else on the walls of the brick structure. Using his flashlight to light the bricks, he saw some white scratches scribbled on the walls. Christopher could not figure out what it said until he came nearer. He could then see that there were 4 vertical lines on the walls. It was odd, to say the least. He ran his hand over the scratches to inspect them. It felt like the scratches were made using fingers since they were rather superficial, but deep enough to mark the cement. Who could have been eager to escape the place? As he thought about this, he found yet another thing that would appear in his nightmares. On the other wall, he found more scratches, but they weren't simple lines this time. No, he found an undecipherable message that he decided to document. He whipped out his camera and snapped a photo. Perhaps later he could use his computer to further investigate and decode it. All of a sudden, he heard something and a chill went through his body. There was someone else in there. He directed his flashlight to where he thought the sound came from. Nothing there. He turned and kept looking at the writing on the wall until he heard metal clashing and a cold breeze descended on his shoulder. He felt like he just went through a cold shower as all the warmth in his body dissipated. In the beginning, it almost looked like it came from behind him. Then the front, then he could not tell anymore since it appeared to come from all directions. It was getting louder, closer, and more frantic. He ran for his life. He felt shivers go down his spine, and he felt ice in his veins as he scampered off. He could not help but feel like there was something wrong. His mind instructed him to stay still, but his body continued to drag him to the mine's entrance. When he made it out, he held on to his chest and collapsed. He should have figured out that everything was so right that it was all wrong. An untouched gold mine was simply too good to be true. He then gathered himself and then headed for his house. Everything was so still that it seemed the air absorbed the sound of his footsteps. The trees did not seem to rustle either, almost as if they felt how tense everything was. He ran like a madman. He needed to find out what was going on. When he made it to his house, he dived for his study and shut himself in there. There was something odd going on in the mine, and he wanted to find out the answers to his questions. He enlisted the help of the internet. He tried to Google haunted mines, and he felt goosebumps as the results were loading. He could feel that whatever had been in the mine was there in the house with him. Was his mind playing tricks on him? Out of nowhere, the results page finished loading and the first result read: if you want to get rid of the paranormal activity in the mine and subsequently in your life, you have to face it. Could he do it? Could he get everything to stop? There was only one thing to do now. In the middle of his search, he started hearing knocking in a series of threes. He felt a lump in his throat and swallowed. He managed to ask, "Hello?" He took a couple of steps and turned the handle of the door to his study. He went to the kitchen, but a whirring noise caught his attention. It was coming from his camera. Why the heck was his camera making noises? It was off. Things were getting weirder and weirder. He picked it up, even though he was surprised it was open since he remembered turning it off the moment he entered the house. He checked the pictures he captured earlier, but then something odd happened. He found absolutely nothing on the SD card. It had been wiped. He grabbed the camera again and started sprinting for the mine. He decided to face whatever might be in there. He had had enough. Christopher mustered all of his courage as he went back to the mine. He was once again met with darkness, and when his eyes adjusted, he realized his mistake. What was he doing in this haunted mine? The shadowy tunnel already appeared darker than it did the last 2 times, but it was probably his mood that influenced it all, rather than it being darker, or at least he hoped. He walked through the puddles and only stopped when he felt a blast of cold air. It hit him with such force that it almost felt like someone threw a basketball at him. The coldness left him feeling cold down to his bones. At that moment, he heard the metal noise again. He couldn't believe what was going on. He knew he had no choice but to push onward. In all likelihood, he had no idea why this was wrong. He kept walking through the dark corridor, but then halted abruptly. He could hear that the noise was too close. His ears started to ring, and he screeched in pain. There was no turning back now. He was in too deep. The metal noise sounded like a barrage of metals clunking together. He cupped his head in his hands for a long time. Everything stopped all of a sudden. He looked up the moment the sound became muted. The silence filled him with more horror than the noise did. And then he saw it. The chains hanging from the ceiling of the corridor began to swing in a rhythmic manner. It also looked like they were dancing. He felt hypnotized by what he was seeing that he could not even process the sound of swooshing water. When his eyes adjusted, he saw a flood of water coming for him, not unlike a tsunami. "I must be going crazy," he thought to himself as the silence was interrupted by the noise of swooshing water. He felt a headache coming on, and every single cell in his body screamed as he made his way toward the light of the mine entrance. What was he going to do next? It seemed like he could not handle whatever was hiding in there. As he was making his way out of the mine into salvation, he took another look behind his shoulder. He felt perplexed when he did not see any trace of water back there. All he saw was the footsteps he made in there. He started his trek to his house. He knew he had to tell someone who could help him solve the mystery. He could not stand not knowing what was happening, especially since it was living under him. Christopher made his way through the dark woods, but halted when he saw a light. It was coming from his kitchen. Did he leave them on? He was almost sure he didn't. Was someone else inside? He entered the door, but the house felt alone and empty. It does not seem like anyone was there, so he probably left the lights on. He shuffled through the kitchen, but he could not forget about what happened in the mine. Did everything happen? He asked himself when he headed for his study and booted up his computer. Was he going to do this? He did not believe in the paranormal, but after what he experienced, he did not know what to think. He opened the search engine once more and started typing. The computer then let out a loud noise, and the screen went black as if it had shut down then and there. What could go wrong next? He asked. Unbeknownst to him, this was not yet the end of the story. Christopher was both mentally and physically exhausted. The day completely wiped him out. He rested his face in his hands and felt a tug. Out of nowhere, something was pulling at his feet. He then stumbled backward and fell in the process. This was the last straw. He needed to get out of there and ask for help. Perhaps there was a rational explanation for what was happening. He started his car and went to the nearest cafe he could find. There, he calmed his nerves, got a double espresso, and accessed the internet using his phone. He immediately typed, "Best paranormalist near me." He was surprised to see that there were two different places nearby. He hopped in his car and arrived at one of the locations he saw on Google Maps. The storefront had a sign that read Tarot Readings. He felt a wave of relief hit him. He still could not believe what he had gone through, but he needed to know the answers to questions if he wanted to sleep soundly at night. Upon entering the store, the door of the entrance let off a song, and he smelled the strong scent of incense. He saw a woman wearing red and purple. She turned to Christopher and offered him a hand. She began chanting right away, and it was a tune that sounded familiar to him. He could not help but feel drawn towards the song. He recognized that it was the same tune he heard down in the mine, though this was far more melodic. Without a word, Christopher opened his eyes and got into his car. He headed straight for his mother's house after that and immediately put the house up for sale. The developers in charge of the property tried to contact him, but they never heard back from him. Instead, his mother took his place and sold the property on his behalf. She was open to negotiating with anyone who expressed an interest in buying it.